There's a lot of talk right now speculating a huge Pokemon crash, but I want to tell you why it won't do so much for you and I. Now, before I get into today's video, I'm actually gifting a subscriber this Lipard illustration rare. Now, if I reply to your comment with this Sylveon emoji, then congratulations, this card is coming your way. But I've seen growing discussion around a massive Pokemon crash and how it's going to make cards very affordable for everyone. But I honestly think that thought process is a little bit idealistic, and the reason for this all comes down to two psychological principles. Both the scarcity principle, which has been governing modern Pokemon collecting entirely, along with the reactance theory. Put simply, the scarcity principle, which was researched by Robert Cialdini in 1984, explains that when something becomes limited or feels unavailable, like Pokemon Center products for example, the overall perceived value increases. So when something feels scarce, it becomes desirable and triggers an innate feeling of loss, which is very uncomfortable for most humans. And the second one, which is the reactance theory, which was first introduced by Jack Bream back in 1966, basically explains when people are told they cannot have something, they start wanting it even more. It's our brain's way of wanting to take back that freedom of choice. For example, to get a very good understanding of this effect, just look at Moonbreon. Back in 2023, a PSA 10 Moonbreon would set you back 800 USD, which is very expensive, whereas today a PSA 10 Moonbreon is around 4,000 USD. Now, obviously, the difference between $800 and $4,000 becomes huge from a psychological standpoint. At $800, people think, well, I could buy this. It would be a very big financial decision. I mean, it's somewhat within reach, but I don't know if it's a smart decision or not. Whereas at $4,000, it's not even about decision making anymore. It moves from, should I buy this, to a flat out, look, I actually cannot buy this. So, modern Pokemon cards are both a mix of scarcity of not being able to acquire the product, along with a lot of cards not even being attainable, and you have the decision making being taken away from you. That's why I actually want to go over why a crash wouldn't even help a lot of us, because the fundamental principles of collecting and what we all desire are more about scarcity and availability rather than actually being able to own the card. And I think the best way to look at that is look at cards which were once really perceived as rare and desirable, and now they're super available. Another interesting one is the Iono Special Illustration Rare, selling for $68 in March, right now selling for $53. This card's only selling for $53 right now. It's pretty attainable for, how expensive it was when Paldea Evolved came out. This was the top chase card of Paldea Evolved. Now, I mean, that's selling for $53. When you look at Magikarp, that's selling for like 360 US. I mean, how many copies of this card could you get? You could probably trade 7 Ionos for one Magikarp right now. It's crazy. I mean, but in early 2023, this card was more expensive than Magikarp. So it just depends on where people's minds are and what they're trying to collect as well. Now, another really interesting one to check out is the Iono Special Art Rare from Clayburst. This is the Japanese version. Now, I'm on PSA's website. What I like about this is that you can actually see price, data that extends way past 1 year. So right here, you can see that in July 15th of 2023, the PSA 10 Japanese Special Art Rare, the Iono, sold for $1,625. Now, it was super high in demand, very hyped card. You can see there was a few more sales for $1,500 and another sale there for $1,510. Now, if we look at the most recent sale prices in 2025, the PSA 10 selling for $550, $445, or even here you can see $523. So massive, that's a crash, right? I mean, if something's selling for 1.5K and now it's selling for $500, that is a significant drop in price. And are people now trying to buy this card with everything they got? But when everyone's eyes were focused on the Iono back, early 2023 or mid 2023, everyone's eyes were focused on that. People wanted that Pokemon card back then. Right now, not so much. Another really cool example is the Miriam Super Rare as well, another Japanese Pokemon card. You can see early sales for $660 for a PSA 10. Another one here is for $660, and then it kind of dropped a little bit to $570. If you look at the most recent sale prices, currently selling for $52, or right here, $46, or even $42. So you can even see a huge market low selling for $33 in a PSA 10. When the hype and momentum was there, it was selling. When the hype leaves, it wasn't. So there you go. That has crashed. I mean, if something was once selling for $500 and now it's selling for $33, that is 100% a market crash. Are people flocking to buy that right now? Is everyone going at that? No, because people don't care about it anymore. And that's the kind of principle of collecting. When people care about something, that's when it sells for these crazy price points. When the care factor leaves, like right now with this Miriam Super Rare, then the prices won't get there. That's why a market crash will only benefit you if people genuinely still want those cards. Now also, as I was just speaking about some of these Japanese cards, if you do like purchasing Japanese cards and products, that does bring me to today's video sponsor, Bai. Now, have you ever found something online that you wanted from Japan, whether it be a rare Pokemon card or a limited box, and realized, oh wait, they don't ship overseas? Well, that's exactly where Bai comes in. Bai is basically a shopping bridge to get items in Japan. Bai lets you buy from Japanese stores that normally don't ship overseas. On Bai, you can just search for something such as Pokemon cards, or even searching the latest Inferno X booster box, and it will pull up the latest listings from major retailers. Once you order, your items are sent to Bai's warehouse where they're carefully prepared for international shipping. Bai ships to multiple countries and regions, including Oceania, Europe, and North America. So if you ever wanted to get access to Japanese exclusive items, Bai is one of the easiest ways to do that. And what's awesome is that all first-time users can get an exclusive 10% discount on their first orders. You can find the details in the video's description. A big thanks to Bai for supporting the channel. Now let's get back into it. Is the Miriam Special Illustration Rare. Now here's the thing, the card's currently selling for $25. Now, you might be looking at that and thinking, oh, okay, yeah, not that much of an exciting card, right? I mean, yeah, of course it's selling for $25. But here's the thing you gotta remember. This was once the top chase card of Scarlet and Violet Base. Scarlet and Violet Base is like 6 months away from being 3 years old. And you can see that this card is not even in like the top 3 most desired cards from Scarlet and Violet Base. You've even had a lot of illustration rares from the set overtake it. Here's the thing about those principles that I spoke to you about before earlier in the video. Right now, a lot of people can buy this card. When it was a big chase card and everyone wanted it, everyone wanted the card because those principles were at play. So when people say, oh, yeah, but the Pokemon card, when they crash, I'm gonna just buy it all and I'm gonna just buy what I want. Well, are you buying the Miriam Special Illustration Rare right now? It is, by definition, it has crashed because when it released, it was selling for so much more than right now. So, it's very interesting to see that, right? Because I think a lot of people, there will be pockets of people who are like doing their master sets. I'm not saying that. Like, you will definitely get people that like they're waiting for that card to drop down a little bit in price for their master set, or they want that card, in their collection really bad. But on a general scale, the reason why everyone loves collecting is because you've got this feeling like it's a little bit unattainable. You've also have this feeling that, hey, it's finite, there's only so much amount of these products in existence. So these kind of principles, dictate so much more about collecting than whether or not a card drops in price. Because if a card drops in price, and I'm going to show you a lot of cards that have dropped in price and no one really wants them anymore. And that's why I actually think collectibles are here to stay, because they so much rely on that scarcity and that feeling of being unattainable for people to want them. Another one is the Iron Crown Special Illustration Rare. Right now selling for $45. If I pull this into the year graph, there you go. You can see the top of the market, this card was $80, but I do know when this card released back in very early 2024, it did reach a market high of 100 US. So right now it's selling for $45. So you can pretty much buy 2 of these cards for what you could have purchased it, in early 2024 when Temporal Forces released. Are people buying it right now? Are people going really bullish on this card? No, not really, because like I said, it's selling for $45 and there's not many people that want this card right now, because what people really want is the chase. They want that feeling of, because even if all these cards start crashing, you will still have pockets of cards that start rising. I can guarantee if Modern went actually through a massive price crash, I guarantee there would be, whether it be like black-white cards or, XY cards or some Diamond and Pearl cards, they would start spiking in price, because it's not that the market leaves the hobby, it's that the market's eyes just shift to something else. And it's very likely if Diamond and Pearl cards all just started climbing crazily in price, and the hobby would just try go for those kind of cards. So, it is interesting how the market behaves as well. So that's why when a lot of people are saying, hey, a market crash, sure, if you're trying to get a master set, it will be pretty good. But on the general, like a lot of people's eyes are going to move to something else and they're going to be focused on that as well. Now, here we go. Another very interesting Pokemon card to look at, the Darkness Ablaze Charizard. Now, this card was a massive chase card in 2020, and this card was actually one of the first cards that came out in the first Pokemon boom of 2020, right? And it kind of released at a very unique time because alternate arts for the Sword and Shield era hadn't released yet, so this was just a massive Charizard chase card. Everyone really wanted it. You can see early sales, check this out, you know, in September 3rd of 2020, selling for 700 US. You can see right there, selling for 662, and then it had a few high sales of like $730, you know, 830 US. It was really selling for a high amount back in 2020. Then you can see right now, if we look at recent sale figures, selling for $160. You can even see a sale price for 200 US. Right now, there's not that much hype around, you know, the Charizard from Darkness Ablaze. Like I said, it once was a top chase card. Now, are people really flocking to this card? Do people really want it? You will get certain collectors that really will like it, and especially people that like have big nostalgia for, you know, Sword and Shield sets and Charizard collectors who want to kind of get PSA 10 versions of this card. But in terms of the general population, in terms of most people are far more focused on the latest special illustration rare. The market is such an interesting thing with collectibles because so much of it has to do with what everyone's kind of hyping or everyone cares about. If the care factor leaves, the prices tend to leave as well, and it's very interesting. Unless there's super low pop reports of cards, you know, like Gold Star cards, they're kind of always gonna be something that have huge demand, or, you know, first edition base set cards, the PSA 10 versions, they're always gonna have a market for that because they've solidified their legacy. But, you know, cards like the Darkness Ablaze Charizard, or, you know, a lot of cards that I'm about to show you, they haven't really gotten that legacy within collecting yet. Like I think Moonbreon, that card is a perfect example of a card that I think has now really established its legacy. I think even 15 or 20 years down the line, people are still gonna want that card because it is so iconic. But you know, it is so rare to get a Pokemon card like that. I don't even think the Scarlet and Violet era has a Pokemon card like Moonbreon as of yet. Probably the closest thing we have is the Bubble Mew, but then again, we're gonna have to see because it takes years to kind of uncover that. Like I said, it's gonna probably take another 5 or 6 years to see if something comes out and it's like, wow, that is an iconic card from this era. Now, the Champion's Path Charizard, the hyper rare in PSA 10, dude, this card was hype. When I mean, I'm not like, this was in terms of like early, like that early Pokemon boom of 2020, this was the card. Everyone knew of this card. It's actually the exact same artwork as the Gigantamax Charizard from Darkness Ablaze, but of course it is in a hyper rare, a rainbow rare, which by the way are discontinued. So maybe we will get some rainbow rare hype. Unlikely though, because I don't think people really like them that much. But early days, you know, selling for $2,000 in October of 2020. You know, there's a lot of sales for $2,000. You know, you can see $1,815 and, you know, $1,500. If we look at recent sales, you can see the most recent sale is $306, $366, and of course $350. So the market demand for this card, or that massive hype, isn't really there for this Charizard anymore. But once upon a time, I mean, this was a top chase card, right? This was super in demand. People thought that this card was gonna be like, you know, the biggest kind of card that Pokemon's ever seen because it was a hyper rare Charizard. Mind you, this card is ridiculously difficult to pull. It is a very, very rare card. You know, the rainbow rares have very difficult pull rates, so it's very interesting to see that. But then again, it doesn't really matter that the card's so rare. What matters far more, do people want it right now? If there was a big swing and people started really wanting this card again, then yes, this card would continue to climb in price. But right now, it doesn't have that hype. It doesn't have what people really want at the moment. It's not what collectors are really gravitating towards right now. So it's just interesting to see this, right? And it's good lessons for a lot of people who are new to collecting, because a lot of the cards that you're looking at right now, you might be thinking, oh, are they ever going to crash in value? And there will be a lot of Pokemon cards from this era that tank. There will be so many. But, you know, will you still want them when they crash, right? That's the question. I bet that a lot of people wanted this card back in 2020, and right now they're looking at it like, it's probably not that interesting because we've had so much more interesting artworks release, and of course, that's what happens. Now, another really cool one is the Golden Snorlax from Chilling Reign. I'm gonna pull this into the year graph so you can see how this card's worked. Now, interestingly, this card is actually recovering a little bit, but you can see we're selling for $60 this time last year, and you know, it's really climbed up. Found like a high point for $89 in June this year, then it went back down to $80. Right now selling for $95 US. So, you know, the Golden Snorlax from Chill and Rain was a very desired card in early 2021. And, you know, now it's seemingly like getting a little bit more hype. But what's really interesting is this card is very difficult to pull. it's super rare. You know, Chilling Reign is an old set now, dude. Like, you know, well, I probably can't say it's super old, but like, you know, 2021, we're nearly in 2026. It is definitely approaching that point where it's like, okay, it's an older set. And, you know, you'll very slowly get more of these Snorlaxes drip fed on the market. Whereas the Pokemon Center exclusive Snorlax, you can see right now, this card's currently selling for 256 US. And, you know, it's a bit more of a recent card than the Snorlax from Chilling Reign. And mind you, this is a guaranteed promo card inside Pokemon Center exclusive Pokemon 151 Elite Trainer boxes. You could probably open 2 cases of Chilling Reign and it's very unlikely you'd pull the Golden Snorlax, but of course that's where the hype and momentum is. People want the Snorlax from the Pokemon Center stamped version because there's so much hype around those Pokemon cards. I'm not saying that the Snorlax isn't rare, the Pokemon Center version. It's interesting to see how the market responds differently to cards, which are probably both equally as rare as each other. All right, now the next two I want to talk about is and honestly, these are probably the most surprising to me in particular because, you know, they were top chase cards from Sword and Shield base. And this is the Gold Zacian and Golden Zamazenta. Now, probably a lot of people are looking at these cards and thinking, wow, these were top chase cards, but man, they were at one time, you know what I mean? And that's the difference. Like, it's so interesting when like hype and when one thing is hyped and how it can just move to another thing. It's just crazy how it works. And you can see like right now, the Golden Zacian is currently selling for $15. Now, that for a hyper rare card that was once the top chase card of a set, that's cheap, man. That is like such a, you know, that is a very, very affordable top chase card or X top chase card if you want to call it for a base set. Same thing when we look at the Zamazenta. The Zamazenta is selling for $10. So, I mean, when you think of top chase cards, imagine if a top chase card you wanted for a set is worth $10 right now, or even $15. I mean, most illustration rares are exceeding these price points, right? And that's the kind of weird thing how collectibles work. It is so heavily dictated by what people want at a specific time period and if there's hype around it. I can guarantee that if everyone just started getting hyped for these hyper rares again and everyone wanted the Golden Zamazenta and the Golden Zacian and everyone was like, you know what, these are top chase cards, I want these in my collection, and the price started climbing up, everyone would be like, hey, you know what, oh, you know, they're really rare that they released 5 years ago, or nearly 6 years ago. And then those principles that I talked about earlier in the video would kick in and people would just jump back on it. But right now, you know, no one feels that these cards are scarce, even though they probably are. But if the demand isn't there, you know, it doesn't really play out in the market, even though they were top chase cards. So even though these cards have crashed heavily in price and they're very available for any collector who wants it, are people really just going out and buying them right now? Not really. So that's why it's very interesting when you're involved in the hobby and you're learning about Pokemon collecting and investing. You got to also understand that it's so heavily dictated by what the market wants at any given point, and don't just kind of think like you want a card in particular, but if it crashes, you know, you may feel like, hey, you don't really want it anymore. That's just like normal psychology on how it works with collectibles, and learning that about yourself is very important as well. I think if you're going to be buying collectibles and you're learning how to purchase them, really know that about yourself, that it's very likely that you want a particular card because, you know, there's a lot of hype around it. Like if you're looking at this Zamazenta and you're like, wow, $10 for this card, I really want it in my collection, then hey, that's a good purchase, right? Because it's genuine, like you actually genuinely want this $10 card. But you know, if it went up to $200 and then you just started wanting it in your collection, then you know that it's not really something that you actually want in your collection. You're more kind of getting hyped about it because, you know, everyone's talking about it and there's a big hype wave around it. So it's just an important lesson to learn when purchasing collectibles. And the reason I can talk about that is because I've been involved in, you know, getting, you know, spending way too much when there's been a hype swing, and then I realize it later and I'm like, oh, I really regret this now. So, you know, it's just really interesting how the hobby works. But, you know, with all that said, I think Pokemon cards are becoming somewhat trendy for a lot of people, and there's a lot of confusion relating to the future of Pokemon cards at this point. And what I mean by that can be explained right within this video on screen here. Within this video that's currently appearing on screen, I go over some of the areas of Pokemon cards that people are currently worried about, and I talk about aspects of the future for Pokemon collecting. If you enjoyed this video, the next video is your obvious next choice. Click the video that's currently appearing on screen and I'll see you there.